Good afternoon to you, alumni and friends. Thank you for joining us today for Inside the World of Filmmaking. I apologize for the brief delay, but we are ready to go. I'm Jenna Mills, the Director of Alumni Engagement Programs here at Towson University and a proud 2009 and 2016 graduate. Joining me today from the Alumni Office is Steve Rosenfeld, Director of Communication and Recognition. He's helping with some of the technology side as well as facilitating with questions and answers at the end. Before I introduce the panelists, I want to share a few housekeeping needs. Attendees will remain muted throughout the webinar. If you have any questions, please use the chat function in your window and direct questions to the host. Steve and I will be monitoring the discussion throughout the session, and panelists will answer the questions at the end of the session. I'd now like to introduce our panelists: Shelley Strong, a 1990 graduate; Debbie Donaldson Dorsey, a graduate of 1982; Frank Farrow, a 1988 grad; and a 2008 graduate, Wade Tyree. Moderating today's discussion is Jenna Burchick. Jenna is a Baltimore-based filmmaker, an IATSE 487 studio technician, and a visiting instructor at Towson University. Jenna received her BS in Electronic Media and Film from TU in 2011 and her MFA in Documentary Filmmaking from Vermont College of Fine Arts. Thank you, Jenna, for leading today's discussion.
Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me and see me. All right, thank you so much, Jenna, for the wonderful introduction. As she said, I am a visiting instructor at Towson University in the Electronic Media and Film Department. And I want to thank the Towson University Alumni Association and the Department of Electronic Media and Film for organizing this event with such wonderful panelists. I believe we have a combined over 60 plus years of film industry experience today between every panelist. And we're going to dive into a few questions and then leave the last portion of today for questions from everyone tuning in. So feel free to please put your thoughts throughout the conversation. We will get to as many questions as we can. Before we dig in, I would love for you to be able to see all of our wonderful panelists' faces and match their faces with their names. So if I could now ask each guest to please introduce yourself and briefly say your title in the film industry. You could start with Wade because I already see his face.
Hi, everybody. My name is Wade Tyree. I'm an international representative with the IATSE in the Motion Picture Department. Before I started working with the IA, I was a technician on films and TV sets throughout the Atlantic for 15 years.
Fantastic, Wade. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and go over to Debbie.
Hi, everybody. My name's Debbie Dorsey. I am currently the director of the Baltimore Film Office, which is a film commission here. And before that, for about 15 years, I worked as a location manager in film and television.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Debbie. And let's go over to Shelley Strong.
Hi, I'm Shelley, and I am the head of physical production for Amblin Partners, which is also known as DreamWorks. I've been there for about 15 years. And before that, I was an executive at some smaller companies. And prior to that, I was a line producer.
Thank you so much, Shelley. And I hear that we have Frank on the phone, so we'll go ahead and go over to Frank.
Hi, yes, I'm Frank. You don't have to see my face, fortunately. My name is Frank Farrow, assistant director, and I work television shows and movies, and I've been doing so for about 30 years.
Wow, fantastic. That is so impressive amongst all of you. Such prolific years of experience. I can't wait to dive in and get to know a bit more about what each of you brings to the table on a film set. So for those of you tuning in, you know, we have some film students, some alumni, but then some people who are just really excited to be here today and hear from all of you. So we know who the director of a film is, right? When we see the credits or even the trailer, and we know who the actors are, but really it takes a huge village to bring a film to life. So I would love to just kind of go, let's just stick with the order that we did for introductions to keep things moving along and easy. I would love if you could dive in a little bit deeper and explain a little about what your specific role does within film, what part of production you fit into, and maybe how that relates a little bit with other departments, if you could.
All right, so I guess that puts me first. So look, when a show's getting ready to start, they'll reach out to the international, they'll reach out to the IA. We'll work with the producers to identify their, their budget, where they want to shoot the whole 9 yards, connect them with all the locals, and we really get the show under contract and we start working. And my time as a set technician, it was about working with the director of photography to come up with a look for the show and what the lighting approach would be.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Wade.
Okay. So I'm going to talk, just because I've done two separate jobs, maybe for right now, I'm as a film commissioner, when a project is ready to come in to Baltimore, they contact me and they're interested in seeing some of our locations. And if I work with the producers or location managers to help give them an idea of what we have available here in terms of locations, and then also in terms of tax credits. And I make introductions to business agents for the unions and other businesses. So we take a very early part in film production, in movies, and even commercials and documentaries and all types of productions that film in Baltimore. So as a location manager, which was a great stepping stone to the job I have now, as a location manager, I was one of the very first people also to be hired. So I would work with the director and the production designer to help get that vision of what the director wants to see and work with the script and scout locations. That's a lot. I know it's a lot, but I mean, maybe some people are interested probably more in what, working on set involves as a location manager.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've read and I believe that in film, it's made up of a million, film is made up of a million relatively simple problems, right? So no problem is necessarily too big, but there are a million of them. And the pre-production to production to post-production process. So that's fantastic, Debbie. Thank you. And
sure, yeah, we're all problem solvers for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And please feel free to talk back and forth with one another as I kind of ask you these questions. I know we're not sitting on the same stage today, but we can kind of, interrupt as we want to and dive in as we can. And Shelly, we'll go ahead and go over to you now. Shelly, you're muted.
I've really gotten in the habit of muting because I spend all my time on Zoom now, and it drives me. I had a dog and he barks and helicopters because it's LA. So in my job, I'm physical production. So that means that I am not creative. I'm not part of picking a script or picking a director. But once a script has gotten into a certain position and the studio has a willingness to make it, and that usually means you have another piece of the puzzle in line, like, a script you're happy with and a director, or a script you're happy with and some talent, they give it to my department. And we start about evaluating how we're going to make that project. So what we'll do is maybe a cursory initial breakdown of it. And then we'll start thinking about where we're going to do it. So some of the first calls that we're making are going to be to the different states and the location and film offices. We look at the tax credits because we want to know that we can get the most bang for our buck. Sadly, we have to chase that a lot. We think about the different elements that are required visually for the project. And we think about where there's good crew, where we know we can go and have good support and all those kinds of things. So then we'll get on the phone with the producers, with the director. We kind of start talking about their vision for things. We'll hire a line producer. We'll get locations on. We'll have an AD start getting involved in a breakdown. And then we just start putting together a plan of action. And then hopefully we get to a number. We do a budget. Sometimes they're just rough initial budgets. We try to get to a number where the studio wants to be. So it makes the project viable. And then once we do that, we get the chance to go and start prepping the movie and shooting the movie. And those are the aspects that I oversee.
Just one or two things.
Well, there's a lot of people that are working, as Frank is about to tell you. Wade and Debbie can attest to. It literally takes a village. It takes so many people, and you see like the credits at the end of a movie. That's the first time I got interested in it. Was you see all the names, all those jobs. So it takes an incredible amount to get a movie off the ground and then also executed in the can.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we will deem today a success if we can convince at least like 5 people tuning in to watch the credits after they finish their next Netflix binge of the week during this time. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shelley. Frank, I'd love to hear you.
There are two phases of my job. One being pre-production. Shelley mentioned early on, I will start as the first AD, and I will get the script, and I'll start breaking down the script. And what that means is I basically have to take every single word in every scene and make sure it's accounted for. For instance, all the actors that may be listed, the special effects that may be listed, the actors, of course, the extras, the set dressing. As Shelley mentioned, a million things. I input all that information into a breakdown. A great movie, it's called Movie Magic scheduling program. It's a wonderful program. And then once I have a basic breakdown, I work on a schedule. And then there's another million things. You have day issues, you have night issues, you have location issues, you have availability issues, you have turnaround issues. Things go into those things. And to me, that's the most important part of the process is preparation. Because when it comes to production, when you're on set, you want to know that everything is taken care of. And that's my job, is to make sure that all the elements, all of the departments are properly prepared, and the director has whatever he or she wants for each scene. And then when we're on the set, my job to basically coordinate all the crew members and make sure that it runs in an efficient manner and make sure we get the work done in an efficient and safe way, and we complete the work every day.
Fantastic. As we tell our electronic media film students here at Towson, we hope that when they go on set that they're just, shooting the plan, that they come on set with their roadmap, and that they're not making it up once they get onto location and onto set. So it's so fantastic to hear you all kind of confirming, really this village that happens before the camera ever starts rolling.
That's interesting, Jenna, because as a director, you have a plan, but directors will have a plan A, they'll have a plan B, they'll have a plan C, and they'll also have a plan D. Because invariably things will go wrong. As you mentioned, we have to solve problems, and so it's my job to help solve the problems that will come up, and they pretty much come up every single day. Something happens. My last director says, "So, what's the deal today?" And I mean, it's just in everything, every day, there's something that you have to dodge and work around. And certainly, most of the time, they're not, accountable. But yeah, it's you have to have a plan. You have to have separate plans for sure.
Absolutely. There's a bit of that Murphy's Law, right? Anything that can go wrong will go wrong on a film set. So plans A, B, C, and D are so necessary. Thank you for that. I would love to chat a little bit, since we are so lucky to have all Towson alum and talented panelists here today. When you were a student at Towson, what career did you have your eyes set on? When you were first getting started, right when you were graduating? Yeah,
go ahead, Wade.
Do you want to go, Frank? You can go, brother.
No, go ahead, dude.
All right. So look, when I first went to Towson, right, when I transferred into Towson, I was a radio major, and quickly transitioned over to film because I loved what the medium was. And, you know, as soon as I started really exploring what cinema had to offer, and start hearing the way, you know, that you know, Orson Welles or Hitchcock or, you know, all these great directors that created looks and feels and the things that really draw you into in the movies. Um, I immediately got hooked. It was like, this is where I want to be. I want to be able to be a storyteller. Um, and that really led to me doing an amazing internship that I had the opportunity to do a lot of recording in an audio suite. I was one of the ER recordists on The Wire. I got to meet a bunch of people. I got to be around a lot of sets. And I got bit by the bug. It's like, you know what? I know what I want to do. I want to be a grip. And I ended up dropping out of college after 2 years at Towson. Uh, I did go back. I did go back in '08 during the writer's strike, and I did get my, you know, I got my degree. It's up on my wall. I'm very proud of it. Thank you. But, you know, kind of the best thing about this career path is it's totally fluid and it's totally liquid, and what's right for me isn't necessarily going to be right for somebody else, and you have the ability to kind of go with the ebbs and flows, and one door opens and that opens another door and another door, and it's, you have the ability to explore and see where it takes you. And that's one of my favorite things about this business and this industry.
Oh, great. So I started Towson University when it was Towson State University, and I started in 1978. I was a mass comm major, which I'm not sure how old the mass comm major was at that time. I might have been one of the first ones. And I liked mass comm because I'm a creative person, and I kind of was looking into journalism and advertising. I was writing a lot. I also took a lot of photography classes with Hay Gungeon over in the fine arts department. And I kind of evolved into PR was my focus, public relations, specifically community relations. That's kind of was what I kind of narrowed onto. And I graduated in 1982, and yeah, I traveled a bit. I backpacked around. I just, you know, decided that I was never going to have a job where I wore pantyhose and skirts, because in 1982, I interviewed for a public relations job in DC, and I got the job, and I went to HR, and they told me I had to wear pantyhose every day. And I was like, even in the summer, yeah. And I was like, forget it. I'm not doing this. So I lucked into getting a job with a still photographer in town in Baltimore, who went on to start doing some commercials. And my first job was working on a commercial at the Utz potato chip factory in Hanover, Pennsylvania. And then my second job was sweeping ping pong balls up for a lottery commercial as a PA for Alan Charles. So once I started doing that, I was like, this is just awesome and perfect. And you know, like Wade says, you know, you kind of roll with it. What doors and opportunities open, you step your foot in there and you go for it. And, you know, I managed to get into locations because I had the great background from Towson with the community relations and the photography. And that was just, it was like light bulb moment. This is my path right here. So.
That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
Am I up?
Yeah.
So I was also, it was Towson State University when I went there. I started in 1985. And I was in mass comm with a minor in English. And I was interested in journalism and documentary. So that was kind of the path I was going down. And I graduated, was on the 4.5-year plan, and I started working on my master's there. And because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And then I was having this conversation with Frank and Debbie the other day. They were shooting Avalon in Baltimore, and my boyfriend at the time, they were shooting the exterior of the house at my boyfriend's house, and I was sitting on the curb watching everything going on, and it was just the coolest thing I'd ever seen. Like Alan Davio, who just died, rest in peace, the cinematographer, was out there with his light meter, and the makeup girls and the hair girls were getting everybody ready, and there was just like all this frenetic activity. And Debbie and I remembered that she came up to me because I was sitting on the curb, so she was probably like, "What are you doing here?" And, it was just the coolest thing. And then the film lab at the time, I'd hang out at the film lab, and a movie was coming into town called He Said, She Said, and they had 2 directors, and they needed an additional assistant because they had one coming from LA and they needed a local. So I was just like, boy, I need that job. I have to get that job. And I kind of asked some friends, like, what do you say? What do you do? Like, you know, when I go on for the interview, and they said, just tell them you'll do anything. You'll do their grocery shopping, you'll do their dry cleaning, you can tell them you know the town like the back of your hand, which that was when you had maps. You didn't have phones with maps on them. And I just said all that, and I got the job on the spot. There were like 20 people up for the job, but because I came in, it was just like, whatever it takes. And that was the beginning. And kind of like Debbie said, it was like you got bit by the bug, and it was just being able to see what everybody does and look at all the different avenues. And so that was the beginning.
You know, that's fantastic. I feel like that was close to the end of the sweet spot of being able to crash a film set and then have it lead into a job. I feel like things are so much more buttoned up and tightened up now that I always appreciate a good story of being able to sit on the curb and see your dream kind of in front of you. Fantastic. Frank, we'll hear from you.
Hi, I was a mass comm major as well, and I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. Marketing, advertising, film, television. I actually had an internship at a TV station. I thought, maybe a TV station would be a cool place to work, and I quickly found out that was not the place I wanted to be. And when I got out of Towson, I started doing as a production assistant on commercials and other shows. Like Debbie and I worked on Avalon, but before that it was a few other jobs. And being on the set as a production assistant, you're kind of someday,
Did you all lose Frank?
Yes.
Frank, we lost you. You still there? We can come back to Frank. Well, so Frank left off on a really good point.
hone in on.
Oh, there we go.
And I started my quest as an assistant director, and after I got into the Directors Guild on a David Mamet film as a second AD that was on, and that was the start. It was an amazing experience.
That's fantastic. One thing I think I've heard maybe in common amongst most of you, just listening now, is this idea of starting off as something called a PA or a production assistant. And I think that, this has a negative stigma among some of our students because it does have this entry-level title. But if any of you would love to just elaborate on what you personally think is the importance of or the role of the production assistant, I think that would be a really great thing to just kind of tack on to this question now, to just kind of talk to everybody listening.
Like I said, as a production assistant, production assistants have many roles in many different departments. And each department sometimes will have their own production assistant. As an assistant director, the set PAs are extremely important to me. They help, and it's a whole collaboration. My job is nothing without a good team, and my team includes second assistant directors and good PAs. And those production assistants, help support me and the rest of our staff. We work as a team together on set. We make sure the set is locked up. We make sure the set is run safely. We make sure They delegate things, they pass information, we communicate to the crew, make sure that everyone knows what's going on. And part of a production assistant, I tell them on an almost daily basis, is just listen. You just have to listen, because if you're just talking and you're not paying attention, you're going to miss something. And it's just really important to listen. And, as Debbie was saying, like, whatever, if you're cleaning up ping pong balls, put those damn ping pong balls like it's the best thing you've ever done. And people are like the little things. If somebody asks you to clean up something and you do it well, believe me, it gets noticed. And then the next more difficult task comes up. Hey, you know what? Debbie did a hell of a job with those damn ping pong balls. Let's get and that's what happens, because people notice that. And, thankfully we've all of us here have been in those positions, and we were all, I pretty good PAs. We did very well.
Yeah.
If I can jump in, I think exactly what Frank said, right? But it translates across the board to all departments throughout the motion picture, right? Like, if you show up early, or at least be on time, work hard, and do what you're told, like, that will carry you. That's one of the easiest ways to set yourself apart from everybody else. Be there, be present, and work hard, because, just like school, right? Like, you want to be there. You are choosing to be there and choosing to be focused in on this specialty, in this craft and art form, right? So it's the same thing when you get to work. Like, you want to be there, work like you want to be there, and go after it like it's the best thing, like the best you could possibly do, because that's going to get you noticed. People will trust you. When people trust you, they can depend on you, and it just kind of rolls from there.
And I think also a common thread that I'm hearing amongst us is that a lot of us we started out working on commercials. And I tell film students a lot when they call my office, when they're looking for work, is, take advantage of what's out there now as a production assistant, work on these commercials. And we have a lot of great also, student films happening and independent films now in our area. More and more with Towson and Stevenson and Morgan and Micah Hopkins. There's a lot of opportunities to work on sets. When you work as a production assistant on commercials, the whole thing that we're talking about is being on time, working hard. That's all part of networking. You're going to get remembered for it. And find your passion with what you like. Because like Frank said, there are PAs for many departments, and even on commercials, that's true. I know for me, I was really passionate about working with the art department. That was my favorite department to work when I was working on commercials. And and I got good at craft service too. I was a good craft service person in the very beginning. And you don't feel like it's beneath you to do, set the snack table up on a commercial. I mean, every job's an important job. And just getting yourself out there and making those connections are the steps that are needed to, get on to the next job. My first job as locations, I worked as a PA on a movie called Men Don't Leave. And my job was to be on a cigarette boat in the Inner Harbor with the radio, back to one. I tell the boat driver, go back, back and forth. They're all drinking beer on the boat, and I'm up there and I walk with the walkie-talkie, getting them back in position. When I came off a set, the crew for the producers and UPM for Avalon were coming to meet some of the local hires. I guess I liked the way I got that cigarette boat back and forth, because I was hired to work on Avalon. That was my first big movie, and I got location manager credit from working on that. So big deal.
I want to say, I kind of want to point out that there are other aspects also to the job that aren't necessarily exactly set related. A lot of people, and when Debbie mentioned the, with the walkie-talkie going back to one, a lot of people start in the film industry and they're like, I want to be on set, because that's where all the action is. And I think, and Frank will probably attest to this too, you're not necessarily in the middle of the action when you're starting out. You're going to be in an alleyway, locking up pedestrians. so while that is a awesome avenue in, there are other avenues, and those aren't necessarily directly related to the set, but they're just as valuable and viable for job opportunities. And I sort of got my start. I was a director's assistant, but then I went into the office and I was an office PA. And from there, I became a production coordinator, which I really didn't like that job, but I learned about the whole infrastructure of the movie and the nervous system of the movie, and all these other kind of aspects that you need. There's like a glue that happens behind the scenes. You'll find that in the art department as well. That is a department where unless you're like the on-set dresser or maybe a props person, you're not really on set. You're creating the set. You're creating the environment. You're working closely with locations to build the look of the entire movie. You're not necessarily sitting there on set every day. You're opening the set. So, there's so many different avenues and departments, and I just wanted to shine the light on that aspect as well.
Thank you so much. I think that's such an incredible thing to add because, I've always looked at being a production assistant kind of as almost like the community college of the film set, where it's like, you're spending like probably a couple of years there and you're kind of dipping your toe in all the departments, all the classes, trying to figure out what lights you up and what the right fit is. And to know that you can do that is this production assistant as well as someone on set or even in a post-production house. I think that's really great. So I kind of wanted to tap into something a little bit specific about Maryland or like the DMV, even though we have obviously Wade now in New York and Shelley in Los Angeles. Maryland or the DMV is such a special place for making media and making films, whether it's like our proximity to Washington, D.C., for those exteriors that you can't green screen, or, the smaller family-like community. I'm curious if, Debbie, Frank, but also Shelley and Wade, if you want to speak on what you think is special about filmmaking in Maryland, whether it's when you got your start or even now. And anyone can jump in.
Well, I'll start, and just, one of the big basics is Maryland is American miniature. I mean, we have everything so close as far as locations go. I mean, we have cities, we have even, Baltimore can look like so many other places. We've doubled for London and Paris, and we have inner city looks like for The Wire. We have seaports that we've used. So that's just in one concentrated area, but we have the ocean, we have small towns and farms. So all of that's a great selling point as far as locations go. We have a great pool of course, crew and talent that goes back a couple generations now. So, and again, the actors and the talent pool, it's easy to bring people down from New York. We have great locals here in the Mid-Atlantic. So we have a solid infrastructure that goes way back to like the 70s when Barry Levinson did And Justice for All. He was a writer on that film, and Al Pacino starred in it. And even before that, with some of John Waters' movies and Barry's earlier Diner and Tin Men movies. So we've got a long history here.
And I think it's important to just also note, right? Like Hollywood, for all of us, right? We all started in Maryland, right? Like Hollywood came to us, right? We didn't have to go anyplace. So, for me, when I dropped out of college, my goal was to work on The Wire. That was it. I wanted to work on The Wire. I wanted to be a sound tech, and I was super focused on that. How am I going to get that? How am I going to, achieve that goal? But, because Maryland has all these great qualities, you got the beaches, we're a mini America, as Deb said, right? So you have the ability, all these productions come in, and because of that, these are big productions, they're small productions, but, you're learning from the best of the best. So you're learning the Maryland way of making movies, but you're also seeing the big picture of how all over the country. And, if you're smart and you're paying attention, you get to take that and you get to integrate that into your approach to filmmaking. And I think that's one of the best things that Maryland has to offer. It's this awesome melting pot of talent and technicians.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think one of the things that attracted me so much to, I'm from Baltimore, born and raised, but one of the things that attracted me so much to graduating from Towson and staying in Maryland was this idea that the ladder felt a lot shorter. It felt like I could climb it a bit faster and take on some leadership roles at a younger age, with fantastic mentors from Homicide and The Wire that raised me. And I think that that family is absolutely fantastic and incredible. Okay, so we've heard he said, she said thrown around. We've heard Homicide thrown around a little bit. I'd love to dive in between all of you. You have so much experience from, Turn and House of Cards. So I know this is going to be a difficult question, but can you share a most memorable moment from your career on set? Anybody can start. I know this is a tough one.
Did you want me to start? I'm sorry.
Yeah, whoever.
Okay, I couldn't hear very well. I thought about this because I have so many memories and fun stories, and but for me, I think one of my favorite memories is I worked on Home for the Holidays. That was the film Jodie Foster directed. It's actually, I think, on Prime right now, and I just watched it the other night again. And you can see some places in that film that don't exist anymore, like Memorial Stadium's gone. So it's really a great one to watch. Manager, like Shelley was saying, I'm not on set much, and I'm always in advance finding locations. And for me, the main character's house was off of Hartford Road, and it was on Southern Avenue. And I knocked on the door, and that's how you start. You knock on the door, and the people answer. It was an old gentleman. He was probably 90, and we ended up filming at his house, and his son got involved a little bit to make sure I was on the up and up and everything. But instead of paying him a location fee, he wanted a new roof, so we put a new roof on his house. And he told me that the morning that I knocked on his door, like he was just praying, God, I just really would love to have a new roof. And he said when I knocked on his door, it's so sweet. He's like, it was like an angel came. And it's kinds of things that was so touching for me. And I thought, these are the things that I did as a location manager that helped people. There's great fun stories, and we always tried to make it fun, especially in John Waters movies in the neighborhoods and getting people involved. But for me, that was, I think, one of my good memories.
Debbie, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's something that fans of TV and media don't really consider, is this idea that we also can give back. One of my favorite stories when we were kind of de-rigging the stages from House of Cards is, I was in the storage lockup with all the furniture and found out that a lot of the furniture was being donated to shelters and to people that needed it, as opposed to, just getting sold off or just getting thrown away. So I think the fact that you could, give that sweet person a new roof, I think is a great story.
And he got some money too, but the roof was the main thing he wanted. So
yeah.
It's great.
You're an angel.
Oh.
Fantastic. Who would like to go next? Wade. Okay, great.
I'll jump in. So, when you think back, to working on set, there's always the hijinks, there's the stories, the lighting gags, the things that you put a lot of effort into. But the one moment that was so very special, it still is to me, in the moment, I didn't realize how special it was, but it was the last day of filming on The Wire. And we were at the sound stage, and we all wrapped. And next thing I know, there was this impromptu gathering. Everybody's in a big circle, like all the crew, the cast, everybody's there and everybody's talking. And it was almost like you were just passing the ball around the group, and everybody's talking about how special and how important this community is to them, and what this show meant, and what the creative process was. And you start hearing the passion. I mean, I saw tears in people's eyes that I never thought I would. And if you could not get yourself to be absorbed into the moment, it was so magical and so special. And it emphasized one thing, and that was family. And you stressed it too, Jenna. You said, that you felt like the ladder was shorter. Well, I think that's because we're so tight knit in Maryland. Everybody is family. Everybody knows everybody. And it's the same reason why my sister's on this call too, because, she has been supportive. Like, you have to be supportive of your family. You have to be supportive of each other. We carry each other. We lift each other up and push ourselves. And that is what Baltimore film is, filmmaking is, and that's what I learned at the end of the walk.
That's fantastic. For those of you who don't know, Wade Tyree was also an adjunct professor at Towson teaching lighting for film and television, and was my professor when I was an undergraduate student, and it's for inspirational speeches like that. So thank you, Wade. Shelley, would you like to share?
These are really tough acts to follow. Typically for me in my chair now, the most memorable moments are moments I can't talk about. It could be,
Of course.
very nerve-wracking moments where maybe things feel like they're about to, go over the edge of a cliff, and everybody's got to jump in and you got to pull it back up. So, it seems like every day is different, right? And there's sometimes multiple movies going on at the same time, and which makes the whole thing interesting. It's not like you're working for Bank of America, not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's definitely every day there's a new challenge, and there's something that you've never thought of before that you've got to either figure it out, or you got to figure your way out of it, or your way into it, or how are we going to get on top of it. So it's kind of an unending circle of memorable moments when you get down to the movie making. When I think of like maybe some of my earlier memories, Maryland memories, on Homicide the movie, when I was an office PA, we had this great leader. His name is Michael Hausman. He's an amazing producer. He's out of New York. He's still around. He's Milos Forman's producer, and he was a great mentor to all of us, I think. And on that film, which is before cell phones, I think fax machines were just happening. In the throes of making a film, we were able to every week put out a newsletter. And I still have the newsletter, like it's bound, all of the editions of the newsletter that went through the entire shoot and through parts of prep. And you guys probably remember this newsletter. But it was really an incredible feat of a group coming together, and everybody contributed. People would have their stories, and there'd be a focus, and we had images, and we were Xeroxing this thing. It wasn't, we didn't have computers, and people couldn't wait for the end of the week to get their Bison news. That's just one of my most memorable moments, and I still have the book. I think everybody who has the book, they bound it for us and they gave it to us with all of our Bison news editions, and then the storyboards for the film. And it was just a lesson in just an incredibly efficient, well-run production. And it was really kind of formed the backbone of my entire career, to be honest, working on that film. So
that's fantastic. That's such a great reminder too, to save those little special things. I had a very great grip mentor, Matt Craven, that told me to save my first call sheet on my first day on House of Cards, and otherwise I wouldn't have. And now it's definitely one of those things I feel like I'll treasure, and I'm so glad that I saved it. That's awesome. Frank, do you want to add? Frank, are you still on with us?
Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry, I heard. It's always a difficult thing to, the special memories. There's, like everybody said, there's so many of them. I guess from an AD perspective, one of the most memorable things in Maryland is working on the West Wing and helping Martin Sheen throw out the first pitch. When we had about 10 minutes to pull off this, we prepped, and then it rained, and then they said, well, you're going to have 10 minutes. We don't really know when the tarp's going to come off. All the plans kind of go out the window, and then the rain stops, and the tarp comes off, and we get it, and that feeling of like, wow, man, we did it, all this work. without a hitch with 42,000 extras, and the stands were filled with signs for the show, and it was just a really special thing. And speaking of West Wing, another great thing about Maryland, but the proximity, of course, in Washington, D.C. is, a lot of us have had a lot of experience working on shows in D.C. Everybody has to come. There's only one place to shoot the monuments and the Supreme Court building. And last partial films I worked on was on the basis of sex, Ginsburg. And to be on a set, that woman, with Mimi Leader directing, was one of the most inspirational weeks I've ever had. But it was just unbelievable. I mean, this woman she's a tiny little woman and physically, but it was so amazing. We filmed her at the very end of the movie. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but the actress turns into real Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So she's walking up the final steps of the Justice Building, and that is one of those things like, wow, Mimi Leader actually said to me, "We're getting paid for this." She's the director, and it was really spectacular. And there are things like that. Even back to Forrest Gump, and I was a very young second AD. I had no idea what was going on, and I was thrust into this world of all Academy Award-winning crew members, and I was on this set, and it was like so overwhelming. And it was just, but it was incredibly inspiring as well too. It was just incredible that this movie, and you could tell that movie was going to be special. And I saved all the letters and all the things from that movie. The producer sent out really nice letters to the crew saying how special it was, and so there's so many wonderful things that you go through in a long career,
Yeah, absolutely. That's so fantastic. I knew when I asked you all that question, I thought maybe I'll get a bunch of text messages later today because you're going to start thinking of all these memories that are just going to keep flooding in. That's so wonderful. And I do think that there is magic in this industry where there are those sets or those jobs that like take your breath away or just make you take a step back. And as Frank said, we're getting paid for this. There are the jobs that are the money jobs, but it is really wonderful that there are those like kind of magical moments. I just have a couple more questions, and then we are going to open up to all of the people tuning in today. The last I checked, we had over 80 people that were tuning in, listening, which is absolutely fantastic. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us this afternoon. So I'll just wrap up my questions, and then we'll turn it back over to the other Jenna to lead the Q&A. So I have another hard one, I think. But I would love to ask you what you would consider is the most or one of the most rewarding parts of your specific job or your specific career. And we can again start with whoever comes up with it first.
Can I jump in? Can I go first? Okay. For me, the most rewarding part and why I ultimately like physical production as opposed to other aspects of the industry is that there's ultimately the sense of completion. And I just love that feeling of getting this thing, figuring this thing out, getting through this thing with this group of people, ups and downs, the drama, this achievement, all this, and you get to the end, and it's a complete project. I don't think there's a lot of jobs out there that kind of give you that physical sense of getting something done and you can see what you've made, and so that for me.
I think that's wonderful. I know Wade will resonate with this, but like with my experience in the lighting department, there are so many jobs you work on that you never even get to see the finished product on. And it wasn't until like lately I've really started diving into making my own films, where I completely agree with you. There's something like cathartic about seeing it start and actually getting to finish it and see the project finish it. That's incredibly satisfying. Who would like to go next?
I will.
Yeah, let's do Debbie, go ahead.
Should I? Okay. For me, as a location manager, I think the most rewarding part of that job for me was my love of travel, and that in Baltimore, I was able to go places and be places and meet people that I may not normally have had the opportunity to meet, or to be in neighborhoods that I may not have been able to be welcomed into. On Avalon, we were in all kinds of neighborhoods, and homicide life on the street, the same thing. As a location manager, you spend time, you have to build people's trust. You get to know people really well. They're welcoming you into their neighborhoods and their homes. They will prepare meals for you. I've had all sorts of great meals. The wealthiest and the poorest of homes and businesses. So that was the reward for me, and that is kind of off-camera stuff, but it's a very important part of the process, because when the crew arrives, you want to make sure that they are there and taken care of, and that playground that you've helped create for them works, and you don't have any distractions.
Absolutely. That's so great. Wade, your hand was waving vigorously.
So, look, I'm right there in line with everybody else, right? When I was a young technician, I mean, the places I got to go, the people I got to meet, I mean, I got to be a part of probably 20 interviews with President Obama, right? During his 8 years in office, right? Like, I never in my wildest dreams would have expected to have that kind of familiarity with the White House, right? Like, I mean, come on, get out of here. You know, but outside of the context of just making movies, right? That was a pretty amazing, rewarding sensation for me, even on my hardest days, to be able to stop and look around you and see the lights and see the set and the actors and the people. And it's like, oh, this is pretty all right. And as Frank said, man, we're getting paid to do this. This is wonderful, right? And now in my role working for the International, it's the rewarding part becomes, helping people, helping our members and helping their families, right? And that, I think, is just part of that. For me, it's that natural progression as I discovered who I was and what I liked about working on set. But as I started becoming a labor leader and getting involved in other different ways, you start seeing how you can have a bigger impact on people. And, in a weird, it's weird to say that that's the rewarding part, but it really is, being able to help people, even when it's talking about young people transitioning from student to professional, or a member simply making sure that they're getting their health insurance benefits for themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Frank, would you like to share a rewarding moment or a rewarding part of your job?
Well, by far, it's the sense of accomplishment, as basically Shelley was saying. So much of my job is preparation. You can prep the hell out of things. Until you wake up at 4 a.m. and you got a 7 o'clock call, you get there an hour early. You've done everything you could possibly think of doing to prep and making sure this day goes well. And I remember I did a show called Treme for HBO, and we had to create a second line. Those of you who don't know what a second line is, it's basically a parade to someone's life. And we had to create our own second line on the street of New Orleans. And this thing ran about a mile and a half long, and it turned out to be thousands of people. And we had to input our actors inside certain parts of the scene. It was incredibly complicated, and I've never been more scared in my entire production life. At the end of the day, things went without a hitch, and it was like, wow, of course it was a collaboration. I mean, we all did it. Everybody involved did a fantastic job, and we walked away like, man, we just got the most amazing scene. It's an incredible scene. We worked our asses off, and it went well. Nobody got hurt. And the art that we got that day was unbelievable, and I'll never forget that. And that just goes for little things too. It's just you just put so much time and preparation. When it comes off well, wow, it just feels so damn good and so rewarding, and that's what keeps me going every time, every job.
That's amazing. I feel so inspired right now by all of those moments, rewarding parts of your jobs. I have to say too, I remember distinctly getting a message years ago from Wade when he was working at the White House. And I remember being a student at the time. So this is, yeah, like a decade or so ago, and reading that message and thinking to myself, wow, like my teacher can do this, of course, but I could never do this. And then, fast forward a couple of years later, I was also gaffing for President Obama and Michelle Obama, and I remember standing in that room because you had to stand in a very specific spot, and all the staffers were calling me the first lady of lighting, and I just thought about that. I just thought about that moment where I read that message from Wade and really just thought, anything in this industry can be possible. And then to hopefully take that story and that knowledge to my own students at TU, EMF, and I can't wait for one of my students to send me a text message like that. So thank you all so much. Those were my questions that I had for you. And what I'd love to do now, just for a few minutes, is turn things over to Jenna, who has been graciously taking questions from all of our attendees. And so she's gonna throw a couple your way. Jenna, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Jenna. I really appreciate you, your help today and talking with all of our panelists. Panelists, thank you so much for providing all your insight to our alumni, students, friends, and family members. We received well over 20 questions. So as you all were talking, I tried to go through all of them. I apologize to attendees if we don't get to your questions. We're going to try to get to as many as possible. So I'm just going to start by reading some, and panelists and Jenna, you're welcome to chime in and give any answers you might have. The first question is, I've heard many people say you need to move to places where there are lots of opportunities like LA and New York City. Doing that obviously is not always the most realistic for people due to expenses. Do you think you need to be in places like these to start your career, or is it possible to start your career someplace more locally first?
I'll jump in. I'll start. Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah, gotcha.
Absolutely. And then I think Frank and everybody else should speak to this. Obviously, you can absolutely start in Maryland. We all got our starts there, and some of us are still, are working. It's a viable hub. There are great people there. There are great projects that come there. There are also other regional places that you can go that aren't New York City, LA expensive. You can go to Ohio, you can go to Georgia, you can, go to Pennsylvania. So there are other options for production hubs that we didn't have, frankly, whatever that was. Think about it 30 years ago. There's a lot of opportunity, and definitely you don't have to come to the city like you start, but for sure, start in your backyard if you can. That's what I would say.
Just to build on that, something I also used to always tell my students was like, look, if you guys have your heart set on LA, if you have your heart set on New York, go do it. But, you don't have to. You can stay in Maryland. And, it's sometimes it's nice to have a smaller community, than a huge, challenging, unfamiliar city with a lot of new faces. You guys are the next generation of filmmakers. You don't realize it yet. You are the next generation that's coming up that's going to populate the sets of Maryland cinema and commercials. Like, you guys are it. So, you already have footing there. You already have a base. You know where you are. You know the people. I would encourage people to stay as much as they can, right? As much as they can. And don't be scared. Like, as I said before, there's no right or wrong answer, right? Like, Maryland's always going to be there. So if you leave, and you can always have the opportunity to come back, or, you stay and figure your way from there. It's a wonderful thing.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to the second question. How would you say marketing plays a role in the filmmaking process? Would you say it's just a large part of the post-production or pre-production or both? And is this team you hire to do marketing, are they contract positions or do they work full-time?
I'll speak to this a little bit, and just in terms of marketing is its own division in the studio system. or in the Netflix, Apple, Amazon division. They're all going to have their own marketing departments. Um, it's a very different animal than what we're talking about today. And it's honestly something I don't even know very much about. But if it's something you're interested in, then the sooner you get on that track and that path and you start pursuing that avenue, the better you are. Great jobs out of that. You know, very powerful positions, to be honest, very creative. Have a lot to do with the success of a movie. And that was something I never knew about or considered until later in my career. So definitely it's a viable job, and it's a staff job primarily, although I'm sure there's probably some freelance that you might see more in commercials. I don't really speak to commercials, but yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. This is a really interesting question. How do you think times have changed as being a woman in film? Do you believe that film is still considered a man's world, or is there room to grow as a woman?
Debbie, you want to jump in?
Yeah, well, I'll start, and I know you'll want to talk about this, Shelley, too. I mean, when I started out, there were very few women on set, although there were some. I think there are more now than there were back in the 1983 era. I always approached it, I didn't really personally pay much attention to it. I just did my job and did it really well, and not really paid attention that I was the only woman in the location department at the time, or or I was always like the only girl in the van, in the scout van with everyone. It just didn't phase me. And and I also was able to, in my career, able to work with Jodie Foster, directed Nora Ephron. I worked with Agnes, help me out, Frank, on Washington Square. So, I did.
Agnieszka Holland.
Agnieszka Holland, thank you. So, yeah, I mean, I think there were some, but I definitely think there are more now than there were when I started.
I'll just add to that. I mean, I'm with Debbie in terms of when I started. I never really thought about it. I don't know if it's just the way I was raised. I never thought about the fact, like, I'm a woman, I'm a girl. It never factored into something that I ever thought would hold me back or make it more challenging. So I think it's a mindset. I think traditionally in film there were roles that were more of the female roles. That like script supervisor, department, makeup, hair, wardrobe, but that's changing so much. And I think it's just, we're getting to a place where we don't even really need to think about, oh, I'm a woman, how am I going to, it's a great time to be a woman. And there's more opportunity now. So it's good timing. It's the best timing you could have. So, there's just more opportunity all the way through. If you want to be a cinematographer, if you want to be a gaffer, if you want to be an editor, there's so many different avenues, a director. So the sky's the limit. And I think you don't really need to think about gender as much anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to chime in too. I think for me, it was a little different starting out because of my department. So being in the grip department and the electric department, it was a really long time before I ever worked with another female. So just visibility wise, yeah, I was surrounded by men and I was the only female. And I also was not raised, with a tool belt and to work with my hands in that way. But I wasn't treated differently. I was raised up by an army of brothers and weird uncles, in a good way, where they didn't look at me for my gender. They looked at me as a hard worker, and that just pushed me harder, which pushes me to mentor all of my students, but especially my female students a little bit harder. And I want to echo Shelley in saying, like, this is such an exciting time to be a female or from any minority group in filmmaking. After in the coming years of Time's Up and Me Too, there are so many celebrated stories that are out now and coming out now for the very first time, and there are crews where all of the above the line are female or minority roles, and it says absolutely nothing against our men or Caucasian crew members, but I think like diversifying these crews is really adding some special stories out into the world. And Ava DuVernay put up this hashtag called #FemaleFilmmaker Friday, of this idea of if you can see it, you can be it. And I think just seeing, 3 women on this panel today, I think we're showing you that. And I encourage everyone to join in on that sort of celebration. Just wanted to add that.
Okay. Here is the next question. What advice do you have for the downtime blues between projects or during the slow seasons? What are some outlets that you have found investing free time into proved valuable later?
Well, I'll just say, if you can travel, get out, see things, decompress a little, take that time and back to yourself, because when you're working on a film, it's everything. It's 24/7 and it just keeps going and going. So when you do have some downtime, spend it with family, get out and see things, whatever art that you can create, do that. Like what we're doing now in our quarantine state.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the next question just to speed things up for timing. At what point and how did each panelist come to decide what role you ultimately wanted to primarily pursue in the industry, and how has that changed or altered your preferences and altered your career?
I'm going to say Frank should talk because we haven't heard from Frank for a minute.
Yeah.
Well, as I said earlier, I starting out as a production assistant, I got a good gauge of what every department does, and working with different departments on different projects, be it commercials or movies, as a production assistant, moving around throughout the crew. It didn't take me too long to find the best fit for me personally is to be one of the AD, the assistant. My ultimate goal is being a first assistant director, and ultimately I achieved that goal. And I think there's a lot of people that say, "Oh, you're still the first AD. You're going to be a producer." I honestly, I like my job as a first AD. I'm going to retire as a first AD. I look at Michael Hausman or Shelley and Debbie. Michael Hausman is a 75-year-old. He's first AD's movies, and he does it because he loves it. And you listen to that man speak, and it's like, wow, this guy's got the passion. And although he does produce and he does other things, but I will very likely retire as a first AD. I found my place, and I'm going to stay.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Debbie, this question is specifically for you. When you find a location that you like to shoot, how do you convince the owners to let a crew shoot there, especially if they're not used to the film world?
Well, it takes time. It takes finessing. I think earlier I was talking about just being able to spend time, make friends with them. I mean, if you have that time and that, go to dinner or have lunch, and you want to build that trust. And if you have that luxury and that much time, that's where you start. And you also just you make them comfortable through a lot of things like legal documents and making sure that they feel comfortable. Tell them the truth always, exactly what to expect. It's not just 3 or 4 people coming into your house. It's hundreds, and you're going to have this and that, and tell them every detail about what is shooting there. And my God, I worked on 4 John Waters movies. So I will say, I told the location owners exactly what was happening, because you don't want surprises.
But then again, Debbie, if I can jump in, Debbie will do all the great groundwork and get the deal signed. But you really cannot tell people. People are just not going to realize what is about to hit them. So when the crew comes on, we're starting to shoot. Then I always make it my way to go meet the homeowner or whoever's in charge and befriend this person and say, "Hey, listen, I'm going to watch your back. I'm kind of responsible for the crew behaving well." It's up to the entire crew to be good ambassadors and treat people's homes with respect, and because people just you can tell them a million things, you can tell them all day long, but until it happens, they're like, oh my God, now I know what you mean. They're never really until that.
They're never prepared. And Frank, thank you for being that conscientious, because it is true. I mean, we're phase one and there are location people usually on set when you're filming, but we do depend on a good crew to make sure, our goal is to be able to go back to a location, to never leave somebody so unhappy they would never do it again.
Good answer. Thank you. So this question is specifically from a student, and they're saying in some of the production classes offered here at Towson, we as the students often find ourselves going within our own social spheres to find funds to pay for the production. How does the process differ being outside an academic atmosphere? I guess to get funds to pay for production costs.
Well, that's the whole enchilada right there. So that's kind of the hardest thing, really, is getting somebody else to pay for your dream.
Yeah, that's the secret, right?
So, I guess my advice would be, because there's no magic bullet to any of this, but my advice would be to just keep making your shorts, make them really great, and get them in film festivals and get them seen. You guys got Vimeo. There's so many avenues now. It's so easy, but just keep working on your craft and just keep making them. And then that's how you'll get noticed. That's how you'll get into a festival. You'll, get some recognition. And then you can get an agent. Then you can get that whole system going. I mean, that is really kind of the standard way of how it works. There's other ways that people can go about raising money. But typically, it's just you've got to work on your craft and you got to rise to the top and network and get your stuff out there. That would be my advice.
Absolutely, and keep an eye out too for competitions and screenwriting competitions and labs that you can get yourself into if the film that you're creating is a niche and it's for a specific audience. Going after those film festivals to get yourself in, and also utilizing the student rate, the big student discount for film festivals, to get yourself noticed, which could help for funding future work.
Thank you. Two more questions, and then we're going to wrap up. This one is, what has been the hardest thing to adjust to in the industry?
Who wants to start this one?
The elephant in the room.
Can you repeat the first part? I'm sorry.
Go, Frank.
Can you? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of it.
No problem. The question was, what has been the hardest thing to adjust to in the industry?
Tighter schedules, smaller budgets. What I've found is the years go by, the expectations increase, and the budgets do not. The schedule, the timing, it does not. We're expected to do more, and more we're actually getting it done. And it's almost to the point where some things that are expected to be done it's very difficult because there are so many productions now, so many things out there. The money is just not. Certain shows are different, of course, but even on big budget, even on House of Cards was a relatively big budget show for Netflix. I mean, some of the things that we had to pull off in 10 days was just it was very, very hard, really hard, and and it just seems like it's getting tighter and tighter every year.
I think, just because, just to kind of build on that too, it's not things that make it challenging or make it difficult. I mean, through the history of film, right? We went from silent era into, talking, right, with the advent of sound, and then we got into this analog, and now we're moving into this digital realm. Like, this is cinema, art, whatever you really want to call it. Like, it's constantly growing, constantly evolving, constantly changing. And we as technicians, as artists, as creatives are constantly adapting and constantly working to refine and redefine, right, what we can do and what we can't do. And I think it's those challenges that we face that also continue to push us, right, and continue to make this industry grow and to make it's the reason why it's the world of make believe, right? Because we can make anything and everything happen.
And just to lastly add too, in case this was a student asking the question, in reference to get what you have to get used to if you decide to go like the freelance route, is the idea of like a always varying schedule. And then just if I can add a nugget of advice, to always treat your paycheck or your money like you have none, because we can have a really, really, really busy period, especially in the DMV, and then we could have nothing for a month or so. And so it's really important to just, find those hobbies as we talked about before. Maybe it's travel, maybe it's something else, and then just to really keep your nose to the grindstone if work goes away, and know that it will come back.
And different paths, right, to get you into the business. We talked about PAs, but I figured this seemed appropriate. Rental houses, whether it's a camera house or a grip and electric house, right? Those are other great ways for you to get your foot in the door, to start meeting people and to start figuring out what you want to do. As you discover where you feel like you fit best, right? There's also art houses. When you get to some of the bigger markets, they actually have prop houses, right? So there's other ways that you can get your foot in the door if you don't feel like just going out and joining the IA, or you don't just feel like doing the PA work, right? You can incorporate yourself into the market that you call home, wherever that may be.
Great, thank you. And our final question, we have a lot of students that were asking questions about getting your foot in the door in different areas of filmmaking. But I think one thing that might help our students is there one piece of advice you wish someone would have given you when you were a student that you would now find useful for those students that are in the position you were once in?
That's a very good spin on that question. I like, what advice do you wish someone would have given you? I think that's
I wish somebody had told me to treat every paycheck like I had no money. So Jenna, thanks for that one.
Yeah, seriously.
that may
Give up.
Okay, I'll jump in really quick and then I'll give it back to you. But Frank kind of said it earlier, which was, make picking up those ping pong balls from the lottery commercial like the most important gig you've ever had. You've got to be on it, and you can't be asleep at the wheel. You can't be on your phone, distracted. Put your phone away. Pay attention to what's going on around you. You get your foot in the door. You've got to kill it because it's very competitive. It's a really competitive business, and you need luck, and you have to persevere, and you have to be smart, and you have to have talent. And you get that one opportunity, you get your foot in the door, you've got to just nail it. That's my.
Put your phone away, right? That's it. Put your phone away. That's one of I think the biggest trap some of the younger generation falls into. When I was getting into motion picture, I was still on Palm Pilot, so I didn't have the internet quite yet. But when you're there, when you're at that film job, be present, right? Be present, pay attention, because that's what you're there. That's what you're getting paid to do. You're getting paid to pay attention, making sure that the frame's right, making sure that, people are happy, making sure that the story is being told the right way. So, that's probably one of the biggest things. I used to take my guys, we shot on a farm in Virginia for Kern. There was no cell phone service in some of these places. And I would challenge the guys to leave their phones in my work box during the day so they could check it during lunchtime. That way, I knew that they would be there and focused. They've got a job, like they're working on their next job, right? They've got a job for the next 4 months. So, try to make everything a little bit special in that sense.
And just don't give up on any connection that you have. don't give up contacting those people. I mean, I had great advice from starting out. They said, just call these people until they get sick of you. Call them and never stop calling them. And I called this one location coordinator in DC, Stephen Kern. I called him, listen, kid, I'm not going to pay you. I'll give you a job. I'm not going to pay you. Just come on next week and you can be a PA. And that was it. And after that, I never stopped working for Stephen because I just called him so often and I bugged the hell out of him. And he finally gave me a job. And don't give up. Just no matter what, just don't give up. And I tell people that all the time. And I do things like this before, and I'll say now, anybody out there that wants to directly contact by my email, that's perfectly fine. So Jenna, feel free to give it out if anybody wants to speak to me personally. I will welcome that, and I'll welcome to help anybody on a personal level if I can. And I'll just get that out of the way right now. But just keep persevering. Don't give up.
Every journey starts with that first step, right? And it's often the hardest one.
And this was advice I used is write your thank you notes. It's old lady like and old, but I mean, it goes so far. I mean, I got one of my first jobs because I had an interview and I wrote a thank you note. And the UPM said, you wrote a thank you note. So yeah, little old fashioned things like that go a long way.
Absolutely. All of these are so fantastic. And I want to chime in too of something that I've really come into over the last few years that I care a lot about, which is hold on to your mentors, but also find a mentee, because we are family. And, you know, you may be like really hit your stride, but then you got the next generation. So this idea of learn all you can from the people willing to take a chance on you, hold on to those contacts, write thank you notes, you know, hold on to those mentors because there's always more you can learn from them, but then look at immediately who you can pass that knowledge down to. So how we can continue to grow our family and grow our film industry and educate each other.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining us. Jenna, thank you for moderating, and panelists, thank you for joining us. I know we went over a little bit in time, so I appreciate you all staying on there with us. We are recording this session and it will be alive next week on our social media channels. Make sure you follow the TU Alumni Association on our channels and on Tiger Connect, our alumni community. These details are now posted in the window and you can see them there. We hope you can join us for another one of our live events and webinars. You can learn more about these events at alumni.towson.edu. Tomorrow, we are hosting a young alumni panel discussion for life post-graduation. Students and alumni are welcome to attend. So students, you can join us tomorrow again to hear some more from the young alumni. And next Tuesday, we're hosting a webinar on how to Zoom like a pro with 2 of our TU alumni who work for Zoom. We'll be learning how to use Zoom video conferencing, that platform for the event, and also learning about different applications, fun settings, tips and tricks, and security features. Thank you, and we hope to see you again next time.
Bye, thank you.